have an awesome guest tonight. We have Cynthia Dreyer coming on the show. She is the ex-wife of the late Phil Schneider. And anybody who is in the field of ufology, research, et cetera, knows who Phil Schneider is. He's a government structural engineer involved in building underground military bases around the United States, and also to be one of only 3 people to survive the incident that occurred in 1979 between the Great Aliens and the U.S. military forces at the Dulce underground base. We have many topics we're going to touch on tonight, and I am so pleased to welcome Cynthia Dreyer on the show tonight. Welcome, Cynthia. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. So we have many, many topics to discuss tonight. Is there any particular one that you would like to start with?
Well, I think I'd like to start with his death,
Sure.
just to clarify what really happened for him. Because there's been lots of articles out about the possible piano wire. It actually was a rubber hose catheter that was wrapped twice around his neck and tied in a knot. And supposedly he just sat on the edge of his bed and died from a suicide. But he always said in his lectures and to me personally that if they ever said he committed suicide, you'll know he was murdered. And
right.
Certainly that's what happened.
Absolutely. There's an interesting story that you and I have been talking for the last couple of days. I got in touch with you the other day, and it was just so awesome to be able to reach out to you, and you'd agree to come on the show because so many people out there, like myself, who are just, we believe everything that Phil has said, and the incident that you had told us about how he was discovered and the initial report that was given, did you want to elaborate a little bit on what the initial report was given and how it came to be that this catheter tube was found?
Yes, I was called late one night on the 17th of January in 1996, and I was told that he had died of a stroke and that he was deceased and had been that way for almost a week. I made arrangements with a funeral director to take his body from Woodburn, Oregon, which is where he was living, to Portland, Oregon, where I was living. And later, the next day, I went to the funeral director and I said I wanted to see the body just to kind of make sure he didn't have a gunshot wound to the head or something, because his life had been threatened and he was talking about top government secrets. Well, the funeral director said he knew the coroner and he knew that the body would be okay, but he would check it for me. He didn't want me to have to look at it because it was decomposed a little bit there. The next day, the police called me and said his body had been taken to the medical examiner, that the funeral director had found something around his neck. The coroner had never gone to see him. Now, in Oregon, if you die at home, your body has to be examined by the coroner or his assistant, and that was never done. So that was the first clue right there that something was really wrong with his death. Later,
okay.
the medical, yeah.
Also, to reiterate here, you had told me that he was, there was allegations that there was a woman going to his apartment where he was living and was giving him shots for MS.
Right. In Oregon, we had a special experimental program for multiple sclerosis, and Philip had been diagnosed with that, along with a multiple number of other problems that were going on for him. But in specific, that one. So he told me he was in an experimental program with the Oregon Health Sciences here in Portland, Oregon, and a nurse came in and gave him a shot every week for the multiple sclerosis experimental drug. And sometimes he would call me and he would say, you know, I really can't see Marie, his daughter, this week because the shot made him so sick. Well, after his death, I wanted to get all the medical paperwork. I went to his personal doctor. I went to the University of Oregon's hospital, and they said he was never in their program. So he was being given shots. Yeah, he was being given shots by a nurse that was a fake. This was not an authorized program.
So they had no record whatsoever of any of their nurses on their staff going to give this experimental shot to Phil.
That's correct.
So we have no idea who this woman was.
Right, and I think this is the same woman that was involved with his death later on, and also that we saw after his death during when we were all together discussing his death at a church. We looked out the window, and there was this woman in the car with long blonde hair, and I'm pretty sure it was the same person that had been involved with giving him the shots.
My goodness, that's just, there's so many subjects that I don't even know where to start. I know that one of the big ones, if you don't mind switching gears here real quick, to go back, so some of our listeners may not have a full knowledge of who Phil was and what he was contracted to do, what kind of work he did, and some of the things that he discovered while he was working he was a civilian contractor for the government. He was a structural engineer. He was a brilliant man.
Yes, he was.
Knew a lot
Very
about,
brilliant.
I mean, he had a vast knowledge.
Yeah, he was working for Morrison Knudsen, which is a company, I believe they're stationed in Idaho. And he did a lot of work with that company doing military work. So he wasn't in the military, but he was involved with the military because he was a contractor. And he was doing deep underground mountain bases. Now, he was an explosives expert, so he knew what was needed in order to get through certain rocks so that they could build these bases. And some of them were 2 miles deep. So we're talking, a lot of explosives, a lot of work getting down into a certain area and then enlarging it it's like a city down there. One of the examples that he talked to me about was in Colorado, where he went down into granite. And so they're blasting down into granite, and suddenly they came to a cavity that shouldn't have been there. So they went down to explore what was going on, what this cavity was, and it turned out to have in it a UFO and an alien body. Now, this had occurred so long ago that there was actually like quartz that had formed over the ship and the alien's body. This was the first clue that he had that aliens had been here living in the earth for probably millions of years. When we think about being invaded by aliens, forget it. They're already here and they have been here. They've been a part of our life since the beginning. The second time he told me...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the second time he told me about the alien contact was through the deep underground mountain bases was the Dulce, New Mexico.
Right, the Dulce firefight.
Right, the firefight. And he told me about that, how the men came down. And to me, the number was like 21 people originally went down. They're blasting holes, and suddenly they discover that there's a cavern already there. So they go down and explore what's going on there. And they find lizard aliens, Dracos is what he would call them. So they're big, tall, reptilian-looking, and they also had some of the gray, what they call grays. They're the smaller, shorter, with the big eyes, the kind that you usually see in the people who have been abducted.
Right.
The typical gray, right. He told me about how some of them are very allergic to ammonia, and they would actually pee in their hard hat and throw the pee on the alien, and it would kill them because they were very allergic to ammonia. I had some theories about...
Oh, go ahead, hon. Go ahead.
Well, I had some theories about some of our mythologies, like vampires, that they're allergic to garlic. You wear garlic around you. Well, garlic forms ammonia. And to me, I think some of our own myths in the past are really based on the blood-eating aliens that he found in these caverns. They had a big vat of blood and human body parts. And they were actually, they're consuming humans.
So there was actually human body parts down in the Dulce firefight, and as that story goes, to the best of my knowledge, he had a gun and shot 2 of them. Is that correct?
Well, he got shot by a cobalt gun from one of the aliens, and I believe he had a gun as well, but the major damage was to him in his chest.
Right.
And he had a very severe injury where it would split open, especially when he was warm during the summer. And while he was married to me, he had that repaired. He had that injury repaired.
What is a cobalt gun?
Well, it was like a laser, I guess, being shot by a laser. So it was a very thin line, and it went right into his chest. It hurt his lung. I believe he had only half a lung on one side.
So
in one of his... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, in one of his videos, he would pull up his shirt and show the injury to his chest, and that was from the firefight.
I have to apologize. There's a delay on my end, so I have to apologize for that. Now, did he actually see them eating, like, human body parts? I mean, like, because I had never really heard that graphic part of it. I had heard that in one of his speeches he did say that they base their food on our adrenal glands. And,
yeah, they derive one of their happy drugs from us. So when they frighten us and we get the adrenaline going, that's like a drug to them. But then they eat our blood.
Really?
Yeah, they eat it. Yeah, they want our blood, and they eat our body parts. There was this big giant bat.
Is certain ones?
Well, it sounded like the reptilian ones specifically were doing this, and the Greys help them get people. So the Greys help abduct people, usually children. There's 1 million children that disappear every year in the United States. 1 million every year. But we only hear about a couple of them. And if you were to map out where children disappear in the United States, they're almost always around where the deep underground mountain bases are. And they're housing these reptilians now. There's a treaty that we have to house them in exchange for their technology.
Right. Did he mention anything else about anything he knew about these extraterrestrials? Now, the underground bases, the holes that they were digging, what were they digging these holes for? Was this was to expand military bases, but the extraterrestrials just happened to be already living there, or?
Right. The extraterrestrials happen to be already living there because they've been living on Earth forever. But the deep underground mountain bases originally were to protect people in case of, like, Noah's flood or something happening to the surface, like an atomic bomb and a nuclear winter. So originally these deep underground mountain bases were to protect certain people underground so that if the earth became inhabitable on top, they could still live below it. Plus, they have a transportation system in between the deep underground mountain bases. He knew where 152 of these bases were, and they're all connected by an extremely fast system of mobility. You could go from New York to L.A., I think he said, in an hour through these underground systems.
I remember hearing about that in one of his speeches, about the Mach 4, I think he said they went, or something.
Yeah, they're very fast, and they're all underground. He visually saw one of these when he was underground in one of these bases. He saw the system, but he didn't write on it.
Right. The only thing I heard that was mentioned in one of his speeches was that there was shackles on these underground systems that he saw in these trains.
Okay.
For people who he believed weren't going along with the New World Order when it would take place, were going to be enslaved. To the best of my knowledge, in one of his videos, that's what he said. That's just amazing. He had all this information, because if you just think about the number of government officials or civilian workers working for a military or government doing these secret things who aren't telling anybody about what's happening and what's going on. And it's just, really sad how many of us, are naive and don't know what's going on right under our noses here and where our money's going, which would probably explain why gas prices are so high, and that's where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me clarify.
Go ahead.
I would like to clarify about the freight cars, because they're actually above ground. They're not below ground, and they're made by Gunderson Freights, which is actually here in Portland. We have the freight cars are being made here in Portland, Oregon. Apparently, one of the employees, got really concerned by what he was seeing, and when you look inside the cars, they have like 122 pairs of shackles inside of them.
Oh, okay.
And he took a photo of it, and because he knew Philip was lecturing all over the nation, he gave Philip the photo and told him about what was going on. Plus, it's kind of local for us, because he was from Portland and Woodburn. It's very close. These would be used for the internment camps. So if you go to the New World Order, you're going to have people who don't want it, right? And so they have these internment camps, and these shackled freight cars will take the people to the internment camps.
Oh, that's just chilling to hear things like that our, own government would do that to us.
I think what was most amazing about that story is, after the Oklahoma bombing, they were blaming the militants for doing the bombing, and they asked to go to the Senate and talk in front of the Senate and tell them what type of organization they are, the militants. At the very opening up, and I saw this on the news personally, they showed a photo of one of these freight cars and asked the Senate what it was. The Senate immediately closed down. They told all the people to go away. And that hearing was no more. Later in the paper, this happened after the Oklahoma bombing, when the militants wanted to have a hearing in front of the Senate. So they made public the freight car photo, and you know where they got it from, was Philip.
Right.
Because they wanted people to know, that a lot of things that are happening are really addressed toward a one world government.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of what Phil touched on in his speeches. It's just so remarkable. Another subject, if you wouldn't mind talking about a different subject right now, I want to get as much in as possible about things that he knew, is the Philadelphia experiment. Now, his father, to the best of my knowledge from what we discussed, was working on that program. Is that correct?
Yes, he was. His father was Captain Oscar Schneider of the Navy. He was a medical doctor. So what happened with the Philadelphia experiment, Einstein and Tesla got together. They formed a machine that would vibrate the air, the water, sound, everything together. And they were attempting to make a Navy ship invisible to radar. But what they ended up doing was making a ship invisible to sight. On top of that, the ship could go from the Philadelphia harbor where the experiment started to Newark, New Jersey in like 5 minutes. So there was some sort of a time warp involved. When it reappeared, everything seemed okay. They turned on the machine again, went back to the Philadelphia harbor, and at that point, it reappeared. Men were like impaled in the ship. They were phasing in and out. I mean, this was the reality. It's not just a science fiction show. It really did happen. All the men were quarantined into a psychiatric ward in Virginia, the ones that survived. Obviously, the ones that were impaled in the ship didn't survive. When these men died, Dr. Oscar would come in and autopsy their bodies. And this is some of the letters that Philip found after his father became deceased, were these letters that his father wrote saying, what is this that I'm finding inside their bodies? It's behind their eyes, in their brain, in their arms and their legs, and it was a tiny little gold-tipped transmitter-looking thing, very tiny, with Enochian type writing on it. And it was an alien implant. I mean, we would know it as that now because we've seen so many of them. Back then it was a new thing. And so the theory is that the Philadelphia experiment got caught in with some alien interaction. And that's why when it came back that second time, it was all impaled. Excuse me.
Oh, that's okay. I remember hearing about that show. I think it was, oh gosh, I can't even remember what show that was, probably on the History Channel or somewhere, but I do remember hearing about that. That's a very famous incident, and I can't believe that Phil's father was involved with that. That's absolutely just stunning. And then to hear of his own account, and I know, you've told me several things about strange coincidences in your family regarding, your line, and I won't bring any of it up. I'll let you talk about it if you want to talk about it.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the Operation Crossroads, because that was another experiment, Black Ops, that Oscar Schneider was involved with. So again, he's a doctor with the Navy. He's there at the Bikini Atoll with what's called Operation Crossroads, and they actually set off 2 different atomic bombs. There were ships. I mean, it's amazing how many times I see this on TV. You'll see the atomic bomb go off, and in the water you'll see these little tiny ships. Well, those are, Navy ships that were in the experiment. They had goats and different kinds of animals on them, and after the bomb went off, Oscar would go on these ships and look at the animals and see what the radiation did to them. But in the meantime, when they set off that first bomb, photographs were taken at the top of it, and UFOs were coming up out of that Bikini Lagoon. So you had the mushroom cloud, the UFOs coming up out, and water dripping off of them. They were coming up out of the water. Now, the head of this experiment was General Joseph Stilwell, and I got a book on the Operation Crossroads. I was very interested in it, and it suddenly dawned on me that a young boy that my daughter had gone to school with was named Joseph Stilwell, and I thought to myself, wow, what's the coincidence in that? I'm going to call his grandfather who was raising him. So I called the grandfather, and I said, I'm looking at Operation Crossroads, the book, and I notice there's a Joseph Stilwell, and your grandson is named that. Is he related? He goes, yes, General. Joseph Stilwell was my uncle. And
Wow.
my grandson, yeah, wow. And my grandson is named after him. And I said, well, yeah. So and he lives right here in Portland. So I said to him, well, my husband has some photographs from Operation Crossroads showing things coming up out of these clouds. And he says immediately, oh, you mean the UFOs? And I said, yes, the UFOs coming up out of the clouds. And he goes, yes, I was in the airplane that was taking the photographs. And I saw the UFOs coming up out of the Bikini Lagoon. So here was someone who, out of all the coincidences in life, his young grandson goes to school with my daughter, and both of our families are involved with Operation Crossroads. But here's a first-hand account, whereas Philip was just using the photographs, and he was totally right. I mean, there was a base, underground base of some sort for the aliens there in the lagoon.
It makes you wonder about where just coincidence ends and fate, destiny, or whatever else picks up, I mean, some things are just too coincidental, and, when you start to connect everything, it makes you really just step back and take a look at the big picture like, wow, what am I to be seeing here? What am I to be getting out of this whole situation, with trying to push for disclosure. And I know, unfortunately, after Phil passed away, all we had to go by was the videos that are up on YouTube and whatever speeches were made. And I thought, my gosh, it's been so long, this story not be swept under the rug. There's just too much information that needs to get out there. And I'm just really grateful that you're on the show and you're able to corroborate things that Phil talked about and give a first-hand account of, your life with Phil and the things that he talked about and the things he experienced and things that you experienced and, the strange things that happened.
I mean, I saw the original letters. I saw the original photographs with the Navy SEALs on it. They stamped their photographs a certain way. This was not fake stuff. This was real stuff. And all of that was taken. When he died, and I went into the apartment after his death, his higher math books, his notes that he was writing for his book, all the photographs, all the alien materials, everything was gone. Now his wallet, his jewelry, his money, things that most people think of as valuable was still there, untouched. Except his wallet was kind of a weird thing, but that's another story. It's just that the police go, oh, well, somebody stole photos, huh? They stole what? What?
They don't understand. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just making it up. Why would they steal that stuff and leave all this other stuff here? It wasn't a burglary. It wasn't a murder. It was just a suicide. And I know it wasn't.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know better, and, there's so many corroborating things that, the catheter around his neck and the things missing from the apartment, yet money was left, and, and the mysterious woman going to the apartment, and then you also had what you referred to as a watcher that lived across the street from you the entire time.
Oh, yeah. So when Philip first moved into my home, I had a longtime neighbor across the street. I mean, she'd lived there for decades, and all of a sudden she's moving out and a new person moved in. So it's exactly the same time that Philip is moving in, she's moving in. So this is 1987. In 1996, when Philip died, I'm at his funeral. I'm visiting with people who've come from all over, from Canada, Georgia, Washington, and she's moving out. at the very same day of the funeral because she didn't need to be there anymore. But that was a watcher. That was someone who was designated to be there to see what me and Philip were both doing, our movements.
Did she have any family with her? Did you notice any visitors or children or anybody else?
No, I never noticed anything. Anybody.
Did you ever talk to her?
I just talked with her a little bit just to say hello. Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm your neighbor. And, kind of what happened to the other neighbor.
Right.
I was kind of curious why she had to move.
Did she say why?
Well, she said, she had a fire and her family decided she needed to go live on her own. I mean, live in a assisted living place. She shouldn't be living on her own anymore.
Was there anything that was suspicious about this woman other than the fact that her timing was just really bizarre? Did she have an accent, or did you notice anything that might indicate she, was really maybe from a foreign country, or did she seem physically fit? Like, was there anything that just didn't really fit the bill of, a woman like her living there alone all them years?
Yeah, I just didn't have a whole lot of contact with her. But I know, again, the serendipity, the coincidences, and I knew another person who had a watcher as well. He was a lawnmower man. He could send his electrical impulses through TVs, through telephones, through computers, and basically spy on you on the other end.
A guy could?
Yes, right. I don't know if you've ever seen The Lawnmower Man. Again, it's a science fiction show, but I actually physically knew someone that could do that.
Oh, the truth is stranger than fiction.
Yes. I don't know why I'm kind of I draw interesting people to me, I guess. But Philip, he was such a brilliant man. He could figure out mathematically that the Challenger was shot out of the air. That thing did not blow up because of an O-ring. It was shot out of the atmosphere. He said it was a cosmosphere that shot the Challenger out of the air. But it was because it had the first non-military person on it. If you remember the teacher. Yeah.
What was you going to say, hon?
I forget the name of the teacher that was on the Challenger that day, but that's why it was shot out of the air.
Yeah, offhand I wouldn't know. I'd have to look that up. But, I mean, if anybody would know, he would know, definitely. I mean, he, like you said, his wealth of knowledge and things like that, people like ordinary people who don't have the education with, like, the mathematics and, what he knew about explosives, he definitely was at a higher education level than most people, I would say. And that gave him an advantage, a wealth of knowledge, that power of knowledge.
Yeah, and also he talked about the Oklahoma bombing when you talk about explosives and him knowing what caused what. He said that the Oklahoma bombing was a military explosive in one of the elevators. There actually had been 2 bombs, one on each side, that, how usually you have 2 elevators opposite each other, right? So the bomb went off in one, but it didn't go off in the other. And if you can recall, when they were coming in to try and rescue people, they suddenly all started to run away because they said there was another bomb that they found. They really had found another bomb. It was in the other elevator, but it hadn't gone off. But he could tell by the U-shaped explosion, the way the building looked, that this was not just a car bomb on the outside of the building. He could tell it was in the elevator.
Did he say why they would have done that? What the motive was behind it?
Yes, because the very next day they were going to release all the papers from Waco. And something was going on at Waco. It was much more than just the Davidian cult. If you remember, the Davidian cult was building tunnels under their complex. Well, they found something under there that they shouldn't have. They found, yeah.
So this was tied into that complex where, gosh, that was so many years ago. I'm trying to refresh my memory on it. There was mass suicides at that complex, or like, what was the story behind that one?
The FBI went in and they were trying to get the people out, and instead of getting them out, they accidentally set fire to it and burnt all the rest of the people that were there in the complex. And they found them in a bus underneath. They were, had been trying to build these tunnels underneath their complex, and they found a lot of the people who had died in that tunnel area.
Okay. So
but
that's
the
how
FBI basically went in and slaughtered them, yeah.
So they found something? He didn't say what they found?
Well, he believes they found one of the tunnels that goes to the alien complex.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
it just
so
they can find out.
So that
gets better and better.
So the Oklahoma bombing was actually to cover up what was going on for Waco. And all the federal people, the people that were in the federal government, if you look into the story, they were not in the building. Somebody knew ahead of time that was going to happen. Yeah. They knew ahead of time it was going to happen.
Oh, that rings a bell. That rings a bell with, current events or within the year 2000. So it's just, it doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. I hate to say that. So the reason Phil wanted to be a whistleblower, so to say, was due to a friend of his died, Ron Rummel.
Yes, uh-huh.
Did you want to tell us that?
Yeah, there was a little digest that they were actually writing. Just a little digest. It was called the Alien Digest. And it got to be pretty famous. They were getting orders for it from Australia. Beachhead is another newsletter that talks about aliens and the One World Order and some of the top secret things that are going on in the world. So it was actually going out a lot into all over the United States. So for this little tiny Alien Digest, it was getting a lot of people to look at it. And all of a sudden, I remember Philip calling me up one day saying, Ron Rummel is dead. I said, Dale, what happened? Well, they found him in a park. He shot himself. And he killed himself. And I said to Philip, Philip, you know Ron. He wouldn't have killed himself. What the heck? Are you sure? So he went and got the police report that showed he'd been shot with a gun, and there was blood on his hand, but not on the gun. So apparently after he shot himself and killed himself, he wiped his gun off.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, of course, couldn't happen. So somebody had been there and forced him to shoot himself. And that made Philip really mad.
Right. What were some of the things that was being printed in that book? Do you know what they were talking about in the book?
I think they were talking about, again, how there are several theories about how the One World Order is going to happen. They're going to fake an alien attack so that we have to all get together and fight the aliens, and they're going to create laws that will allow them to put people into the concentration camps that don't agree. Well, we've come pretty close. If you think about Katrina and what happened there, Bush almost got through one of these orders that would have given him powers in martial law.
Right.
And that could have been nationwide, and that could have started it right there.
So
but it didn't go through.
Sorry, go ahead, hon.
But it didn't go through. Thank goodness. Otherwise, I'm sure the world would be a little different right now.
So at that time, what was some of Phil's thoughts on what he believed the one world order, how it was going to happen? Besides the fake alien attack, did he say anything at all about, I don't know, maybe some of the aliens being on our side and trying to help us in this?
Oh, that's a good question, because he said there were 7 types of aliens, and out of those, 2 were friendly that actually tried to help us. One of them looks very similar to us. They're a little larger.
Did he say what they were called?
He said they were from the Pleiades.
Oh, the Pleiades.
So the aliens that were from the Pleiades looked more like us and were more friendly to us. But in his mind, he said all aliens were bad because they were all trying to manipulate us. Whether it was good or bad, they all have their own agenda as to why, we're either a food source or something else for them, that they wanted to control us. And so it would be really hard for any of us to determine which one was good and which one was bad. Obviously, the ones that are eating us in a vat of blood are the bad ones. The Greys are their minions. The Greys are working as slaves for them. But there are several other varieties out there.
I remember in one of Phil's speeches he talked about actually knowing about one or some of the aliens that were working with us along to help us with our technology.
Right, and I don't know whether helping us with our technology is helping us. There was an agreement, a treaty that would allow them to abduct a certain number of humans in exchange for them sharing their technology with us. So they had to give a list of all these people that they abducted to the government, so they were allowed to do it. However, the government found out that they were abducting a whole lot more than what they were giving them. So there's about 15 million people in the United States that have been abducted.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, and I just can't fathom the audacity of, it's a shame not everybody in our government can possibly be that bad, but you got to think about the ones that did that treaty with those extraterrestrials. You're going to make a deal with somebody who's far beyond your mental capacity and your intelligence, and you think they're going to abide by this treaty, and it's almost like making a treaty with, an ant or a cockroach. I hate to refer to the human race as that, but that's probably what a lot of them, look at us at, because with the technology that they possess to have the stealth to come into your home and without, alerting neighbors or anyone else through locked doors, security systems, those security dogs or whatever, and manipulate your mind in such a way that you either think you had a dream or a deceased relative or something else that you thought was entering your home, and it's them. And it just blows my mind that, we would think, oh, well, give us your technology and we'll give you some humans. And I can't believe they think that the extraterrestrials would actually go along with that. So it doesn't surprise me that it ended up the way it did and they lost control over the situation.
I think one of the reasons why Philip was talking out, not only because of his friend who was murdered by suicide, but because he had, a child. He wanted his daughter, Marie, to be able to survive. And he could see a big danger on what was coming. He wanted people to know, he wanted his daughter to know that I think knowledge is bliss. The more you know, the better able you are to react to a situation. So if you know that X aliens are already here. If they're attacking us, it's a falsehood. Then that's going to help you react in a different way and keep the one world government from occurring.
So Phil truly believes that the New World Order would have a lot to do with a fake, staged alien invasion, and that's how they would do it, would be to scare all of us into mass hysteria and believing whatever they would say, oh, well, here's how we fix this, type thing, when actually there won't be an alien invasion.
You've got it. That's it.
Oh.
They're already here. There's no invasion.
Do you know which kinds are already here? I know you mentioned the Greys and the Dracos. Are you aware of any other type of extraterrestrial that Phil may have mentioned that may already be taking up residence somewhere in the mountains or underground in Earth?
Well, he said there were 7. So obviously we know about the 7 that are visiting us, whether they're already living here or coming in on ships and visiting us. Okay. The ones that are underground right now are the Greys and the Draco, reptilian type. And they're like vampires. They eat us. They suck our blood and create fear for their drugs. When I think about, some of those stories, like the vampires, even the Pied Piper, some of these stories just are, I think, clues to keep us safe.
Oh, really? Hey,
if you think about Pied Piper, what does he do? He opens up a mountain and takes the children away. How do you open up a mountain?
Right, exactly.
It's a deep underground mountain base is what it is. And even Open Sesame, what are they doing? They're opening a mountain. So
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
A lot of these ancient stories that we have are really clues about what's here on Earth already.
There's so many reports all the time about strange aircraft, strange lights, strange activity around mountainous areas, and areas like that near military bases and out in the desert. And there's so many. If you do your homework, you go online, and this is for everybody, you find so many stories about strange military or beings coming out of like the mountain area regions near Arizona and Nevada, and you can only hear so many stories before you finally click and say, gee, maybe there's some truth to all this. And that's the purpose of this show, is to pursue disclosure, because in my opinion, our government, the United States government at least, I can't speak for other governments around the world, the U.S. government is never going to disclose and admit to the alien presence. It will never happen. You might hear 1 or 2 clues come out of NASA or wherever else. Our government will never admit to it, and that's my opinion. I think that we, the people, are the disclosure. Our voice, our stories, our information that we share with each other is the disclosure, and that's all we need. Because we already know. We already know. They can only lie for so long. And I've seen the craft. I've seen the strange, whatever they call it, the TR-3B or whatever that mocks the alien technology or has alien technology. I've seen it right here in my neighborhood, because I live in Northeast Ohio. I got Vienna Air Base in Youngstown, not far from me, and then in Dayton is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which allegedly the Roswell crash saucer, along with the alien recovered bodies, were taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
So do you want to hear a tie-in with all of that?
Absolutely.
My father, my biological father, was working at Wright-Anderson Air Force Base. Think about Operation Crossroads, okay? You have Operation Crossroads, and you're dropping an atomic bomb. Do you know where those planes came from?
Probably Wright-Patterson.
Actually, they came from Roswell.
Okay.
They came from Roswell, okay? So here you have the bomb going off. You've got all these ships coming up out of the water. And a couple of months later, you've got alien ships crashing in Roswell. And that's not a coincidence, believe me. I saw a movie. I saw a movie on Roswell, and they show this captain going into the office, and on the back wall, it's the Bikini Atoll. It's the same map that Oscar was looking at in a photo that I have. It was like, oh my God, the light bulb goes off. So many of these things are tied together. Operation Crossroads, Roswell, Wright-Patterson, all of those are all tied in together. And so is Montauk, New York.
Yeah, I'm just now learning about Montauk, New York. That's something I got to go do some research on. And that's what I love about having this show, and I'm so glad that you're on with me because, knowledge is power. And I know like I said, there's a lot of people listening to the show right now that believe everything that Phil said about what he knew regarding all of these subjects. And I think it's wonderful that you're on the show to corroborate that. And anything else that you could tell us that we may not already know about that you think we would benefit from. I know it's been a long time. I know a lot of it is probably difficult to remember at this point. But anything else you could tell us about anything he may have talked about regarding any of these subjects of importance that we could, benefit from?
You mentioned that you've seen craft and what have you. Philip was talking to his brother at a Thanksgiving gathering, and I was kind of new to Groom Lake, Area 51. I really didn't know that much about it, and they were talking about it. Apparently, both Philip and George Schneider, his brother, flew top-secret planes out of Area 51. And I heard George say to Philip, if you keep talking about this in public, you're probably going to end up dead.
Wow.
So I kind of heard that and went, oh, yuck. That there was
something talking about like the aircraft, talking about the top secret aircraft.
Yeah, one of the first programs he gave was about the B-12 and the stealth planes. He gave a talk at the Bigfoot Society, and he was talking about these top secret planes. And his brother was giving him a warning that, if he kept talking about all this stuff, he was going to end up dead.
Yeah, that's probably not very smart of our military to be flying these secret aircraft over residential neighborhoods, especially, at night and on, holidays. There was an incident I had mentioned on my show before, 2 Halloweens ago. I had seen, it was probably, I can't be sure of what it was. It was definitely high-tech, whatever this craft was. It glowed bright orange and hovered for an extended period of time above the neighborhood, and then proceeded to shut the orange light off or whatever was causing it to glow bright orange. And then it flew over the street I was walking up, and, it either had a chevron shape or a triangular shape, and I can't recall because the back end of it was very hard to see because there was a strobing light going back and forth on the back. And I just remember this craft making little to no noise. There was just like a windy whooshing sound when it went overhead, and a big white light on the front of it, and I believe a blue light on each of the wingtips on each side. And I just remember thinking to myself, why would this aircraft, if it's a secret government aircraft, be hovering over my neighborhood when it's still kind of daylight out on a holiday where everybody's outside? I don't get it. If they want it to be secret, why are they doing that,
I think they want to know how the public's going to react to stuff like that.
You think it was sort of like a stage then?
Yeah. I keep thinking back to when we landed on Mars for the first time. You probably weren't alive then, I don't know. But I was, and I was watching I was watching TV. I mean, it was like the first walk on the moon. This was the first landing on Mars. They had this little machine go out and take the soil and analyze it. And it said life. It had found evidence of life on it. And immediately you got this response from NASA saying, oh, it wasn't life. It was just a chemical reaction, blah, blah, blah. But I know they found life, and they just didn't want to tell us.
Sure.
Like, if you're a witness to that, a machine going out, testing the soil, and saying that there's life, and then NASA goes and says, no, no, no. And now what are they trying to tell us? Yeah, there probably is life on Mars. They've been preparing us for years to try and accept the fact that we're not the only living things out there.
Yeah, just like those photographs of the moon surface about the alleged base that's, there's vents coming out of the surface of the moon.
Yeah, yeah. I just believe that, yeah.
I was just saying the photographs that were airbrushed of the surface of the moon, and I believe it was the NASA employees that were instructed to airbrush the photographs, to airbrush away like those ventilation chambers coming out of the moon's surface.
Yeah. Well, I met this lady at my genealogy library, of all places, right? Again, this is serendipity. Her father worked in NASA. He helped develop some of the machines that walked around on the moon. And she had a moon sample, a sample of the moon. And she was going to maybe sell it on eBay, and the FBI were all over her.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. The thing about the moon rock is it's exactly like Earth rock. It's no different. The moon rock is Earth rock. And I guess they don't want us to know that.
You'd be surprised at, like, the experiment they did where they allegedly, people were saying, oh, we blew up the moon and because we want to see water spray out of it. You got to wonder what was the real motive behind it. Hey, let's see if the moon has water. You just now want to see that? It's been a while, you know. So, yeah. Hey, listen, Cynthia, a friend of mine is calling in. It's Chris Augustine, and he has a website called aliensthetruth.com. And he's calling in right now. He probably has a few questions. Is it okay if I bring him on?
You bet.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Chris. You're on the air.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
How's everybody tonight?
Cynthia, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Just fine.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
There's a little bit of a delay tonight.
I just wanted to comment on one thing that you were just talking about, the warning that Phil had gotten when they were saying, you know, doing the work from Area 51 secret planes and everything, and they said, you know, you keep talking about this, you'll end up dead. One of the interesting things that I read in one of Stanton Friedman's books, and more recently in one of Nick Redfern's books regarding contactees, is the government is no stranger to following people related to the UFO field. Contactees especially, because they almost always had an anti-nuclear type agenda. They tended to be a bit on the communist side, so they would actually have FBI and even Air Force personnel investigating them, you know, questioning them, finding out their motives, going to UFO conferences, seeing what these people were telling people, what type of secrets they were telling, and to take it even further, especially during the 60s and 70s, they would infiltrate UFO support groups or, you know, forums. They would go to these meetings posing as interested parties just to see what people were discussing, if there were any secrets being revealed, etc. And I think the one difference from 1996 compared to now, why people aren't showing up dead more often is the Internet. People are much more visible now. It would be a lot more difficult to silence someone because they're so well connected and people are so well informed of what's going on, to have a predominant UFO researcher just suddenly, die from, any particular circumstances would seem a bit odd, and it would tick people off right away to, hey, must be something to this because they just mysteriously died.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Philip had better protection, but what happened for him, although he was able to survive several threats on his life, was that they started to threaten me and the children.
Right.
So he basically gave himself up to them to protect me and the kids.
Well, I mean, this type of behavior is nothing new. Having done a lot of research on the Roswell incident, some of the eyewitness testimony that was recently brought to light, I believe the book was Witness to Roswell, they talked about a young girl who was 12 years old. I think she was the daughter of the fire chief, who actually handled some of the crash debris. They had a New York City police officer who was an expert in interrogations, flown in and was doing interrogations for the government, asking people what they saw and pretty much forcing them into silence. I mean, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he essentially told a 12-year-old girl after she said, oh, yeah, I held this debris, it was totally exotic, blah, 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 that the desert is a huge place and no one will ever find your body. And this was in 1947 telling a 12-year-old American girl. So if that's that long ago and they were willing to kill people, good luck today.
Yes, exactly. There's so many more ways they can do you in now.
And did you guys hear about that new way that they're doing it? Is they have this Jesse Ventura, the governor, he actually found out about that company. Chris, you might know the name of it, where they're actually hiring civilian people to keep track of their own neighbors and their activities.
I
Sounds
can't
like
remember
my
the name.
watcher.
What was it? Of course, I forgot the name now. I know the conspiracy theory is the name of the show. It was like either Infraguard or Intragard or something like that.
Infraguard, that's what it is.
Yeah,
they hire civilian workers.
Right.
To spy on their own neighbors.
The government actually hires these people. You're absolutely right. And what's interesting about them is these private individuals, these citizens, are informed of threats before the general public. And these are high-profile business owners, utility managers, the people that run the electric company, the gas company, people that run banks, etc., in major cities all around the United States. I think they have representation in every state, are informed of threats against the United States before the average Joe Schmo, so they can prepare their own systems. Now, to me, there's something wrong with that. The people that are pulling the strings and controlling our society are learning about these things beforehand so they can then control things if something did happen and take the power away from those they don't deem necessary and give it to themselves. But that's just my take.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but it is an interesting show, and it's obviously a bit of showmanship, and if you've never seen it, it's a little over the top with his investigative style. Obviously likes to use a bit of muscle, having the history and weightlifting and wrestling and whatnot. But, it does bring a lot of information to light, and they haven't done anything on UFOs yet. But one thing they did do recently, I believe it was talking about secret underground bases and bunkers for doomsday, like 2012, potential whatever. And I think it's underneath the Denver airport.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently it's one of the biggest underground bases ever. And they've removed, I think it was more dirt and rock than the entire length of the airport on top. So nobody knows, why all this is being excavated. I mean, it's humongous. And then they actually toured the airport, and they saw all these murals, and they said something like, for the New World Order or New World Government, this is like the first airport for it. And then they had these plaques what looked like a doomsday type thing. There was huge waves and cities on fire, and it was kind of even displaying this as like a Mecca or like, you know, a safe place, whatever. So, I mean, it looked pretty interesting if you put the dots together.
Philip actually analyzed all those murals because they're very Masonic, and a lot of the symbols in it are Masonic.
Yep.
His dad was a 32-degree Masonic. So that was some of the books that were stolen after he died, were a lot of the Masonic symbolism books that he had.
Interesting.
Wow. I mean, like I said, the more we talk about this subject, the more, like, my mind gets refreshed about things that, you know, I think this is what they would like to have happen. You know, the government, they would like things just to fade and to get swept under the rug. And like I keep trying to stress to the audience is we got to keep fighting for this disclosure. And the way we do it is just keep talking about it, keep spreading the information, and just keep making it in the public eye. And that's great that people like Jesse Ventura, who's, you know, a celebrity, people are obviously going to look to him, you know, more so than someone like me. You know, I'm not a celebrity, and that's great that he's doing that because it's getting more people involved. And one of the things I wanted to sort of backstep on real quick with you, Cynthia, is I remember I asked you when we were talking earlier on the phone, one of the things that I found perplexing was, I mean, I have no doubt that extraterrestrials are real. I have no doubt whatsoever. And I had asked you, did Phil ever mention anything about how what he felt, how the aliens were getting into people's homes, like behind locked doors and so on and so forth? And you mentioned something like dreamscaping or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's remote viewing and dreamscaping, but I think for the aliens, they have a interdimensional ability to actually go through walls, buildings. I mean, they can do things because it's a vibration. It's kind of like a transformer on Star Trek. They can go through places, but I've seen them walk through doors and walls in my own home. But luckily I didn't get abducted. Yeah, I didn't get abducted. They came through, though. They were the Greys, yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's just chilling, you know.
And that's where the chapter in Phillips' book that I was writing was how to avoid being abducted by the aliens. And it had to do with...
What did he say? How do you avoid that then?
Well, ammonia, for one, because many of the aliens are allergic to that. So you could spray Windex with ammonia around your room, on your windows. You could have garlic, because garlic produces ammonia. So, you know, again, that vampires theory, how some of these old myths were ways of telling us how to be safe, is actually having garlic in your home or around you will keep them from abducting you. Also metal, like a piece of meteorite or a piece of iron or a magnet, because if they try to transport you onto their ship, it messes up with all their electronics. So if you have like a piece of meteorite or a magnet, also the cross, the sign of the cross, doesn't have to actually be a cross even, but again, a sign of the cross. There's something about that, the power of it, that can keep you from being abducted. And in fact, that's how it was for me. I grabbed the cross that was on my neck, and they went away, and never came back. And never came back. Thank God.
Oh,
so there's lots of different ways.
I've heard that before, where you know, you hear so many, you know, Chris, his website, he hears a lot of the abductees' experiences. And Chris, I think you would agree that, you know, sometimes that works for abductees and sometimes it doesn't. You know,
right.
The religious aspect, not just the Christian background aspect of it with the crucifix, but other religious articles that people thought would keep them away didn't work.
I think for me, the concept is not so much the symbol that does it, but the person's willpower. and something that they believe in. And I think it's all power of thought and power of mind and mind over matter type thing, that if you consciously will this to stop and you put up a fight and you do not allow it, whatever your symbol of power is can help you. I just wanted to play devil's advocate for a moment and take a step back and say, well, what if you don't want to stop the abductions from happening? And the perfect example is my own experiences. I've only now, some 8-9 years after my experiences, have been remembering what occurred, and there was nothing bad. I've never experienced any negative emotion. I've never picked up on any negative intentions. I've had missing time. I've got an implant in my leg. It's been documented by ultrasounds. It's still there. I can feel it under the skin. But I have absolutely nothing to show that this was a negative experience, and I welcome it. And I just, I'm still here. I'm not being fed upon whatever. I'm perfectly healthy. I'm fine. So, why should I stop something like that from happening? I see nothing negative.
Right. I thought it was interesting you just mentioned you had an implant, because the men from the Philadelphia experiment, as they died, Oscar went in and he found alien implants in their bodies, and at that point he didn't know what they were. But of course nowadays you would know what it is, because more people like yourself have come forward, and we know what it looks like, x-rays.
Right.
Bud Hopkins, he actually showed an x-ray of a woman with one behind her nose. Oh, my goodness. And it looked just like what Oscar had seen in the men from the Philadelphia experiment.
I think
there's so much mystery to this whole situation with the extraterrestrials. I myself, with my experiences, to be honest, I don't have much memory of them, but it's usually of them coming into the room and bringing me back, or coming into the room to take me. And, you have to wonder why all this secrecy and everything, which maybe there is like a bigger agenda going on, and I'm sure there is. I like to throw caution to the wind, absolutely, but I don't like to totally pigeonhole myself and say yes or no, that they're bad or that they're good, because there's so many different types of them. We really don't know too much about it. Thank goodness that Phil, has had some information at least to provide knowledge to us all, and I think that's remarkable. And I'm glad that you're on the show and you're able to give us a different perspective, a different point of view. And that's just amazing that Phil has been able to experience and see all of these things. He saw the grays, he was there, and a man of his level of education is not going to just throw away that career to make up some facade story just to get famous. It makes no sense at all. He's educated. He's got better things to do with his time.
Yeah. He really wanted to make a difference. He wanted to make the world safer for his family and for all the young people. He felt that abduction was generational, and that scared him, because he didn't want to be abducted so his daughter wouldn't be abducted. But I hear a positive event has occurred for some people, and that's good, whereas mostly I've heard a lot of negative things from abductees. The first people who took Phillips' information and put it on the internet was actually a website for people who had been abducted. So I thought, out of all the societies and people, groups on the internet, it was actually one of a group of people who had been abducted that took his information at the very beginning and put it on the internet. And their website immediately died.
Oh,
and same thing happened with, because the information that Philip had to tell, I guess, is so dangerous that they kill the websites to keep it from happening.
Yeah, there's definitely, no stranger to those sorts of things happening. It does seem like, when people see things they shouldn't see or learn of things they shouldn't have learned of, unfortunately things start to happen for them. And what I like to do is just try to keep a peaceful attitude, kind of surround myself in white light and just trust in that I do have angels watching over me. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that good does triumph over evil. And I don't know if I'm just, you know, optimistic or whatever, but, you know, I'm not going to stop doing the show. I'm not going to, you know, be afraid and, you know, go run the other direction. I'm all about making sure that disclosure happens, you know, because it is important. It is a fact that these abductions are going on, that, you know, there's just so much. I mean, Cynthia, when you started talking about how, you know, the Oklahoma City bombing tied into the Davidian complex, you know, I had never thought of that before, but it makes perfect sense. You know, you got to look at these big, you know, events that are happening in our nation's history, and you got to take a second look at it. And like you said, there's clues. There's clues all over the place that we just have to be more aware of, I think.
Yes. Do you want me to talk a little bit about bombing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
okay. So, because Philip was a structural engineer and he was an expert in explosives, so he was the one that was actually blowing out the holes for the deep underground mountain bases. He was very familiar with all the different explosives and their effects. When he saw the Oklahoma building, the Murrow, I guess it's Murrow building, he could tell from that it was a military explosive and not just some truck going off in front of the building. And in fact, he eventually felt that it was a bomb that had been placed in the elevator, and another bomb had been placed in the other elevator, but only one went off. And so that's why he had kind of a U-shaped explosive effect. If you recall in the news films, as people are trying to rescue people at the very beginning, they all start to run away because they said they found another bomb. And then they go, oh, no, it wasn't another bomb. Well, it was another bomb. It was in that other elevator. And the cover-up is so big. The reason why that bomb was exploded is because the next day they were going to bring out all the information about Waco, the Davidian cult, and what happened at that compound. And so what was happening at that compound? Well, if you remember, they were building tunnels under their compound, and they had a bus down there and all sorts of, they were building things under their complex, and they found something that they shouldn't have found. Something to do with the aliens and the tunnels that were under there for them. And I think that's why they were killed, and that's why the Oklahoma City bombing occurred.
Right. Well, Chris and Cynthia, we got about 10 minutes left in the show. Is there anything in particular that either of you wanted to talk about before we go off the air and close it out for the night?
I could talk about the Gunderson freight cars.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Chris, did you have anything?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the discussion. I'm going to hang up and just continue to listen online. So, but thanks again.
Okay, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Sure.
Well, I know the Gunderson freight cars are a local thing here in Portland, Oregon, and one of the employees was really concerned because the freight cars had human shackles in them, about 122 pairs of human shackles in a freight car. And so he took a photo of that, went and talked with Philip. A lot of things came to Philip that way because he was lecturing all over the United States. People who had wanted to make known odd things would come to him and say, would you talk about this? Because people need to know what's going on. And so he took the photo, he took the information, and made it a part of his lectures. And he was feeling that when the government tries to go to the one world government, there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to agree with that. And these freight cars are being made to take those people who disagree to the internment camps that are already set up throughout the United States. And there's enough of these freight cars for 15 million people. which is the estimate.
I've seen a lot of that online, along with the mass graves and the multiple, that FEMA had ordered these plastic containers just stacked up. You could go on YouTube and you can actually find those videos of these. You know, you got to wonder what they're digging all these graves for. I know one of the excuses was, well, our memorial cemeteries for our soldiers are filling up and we need to make more room. And, you know, you have to look at, there's all these, you know, these giant plastic containers that you can fit a person in, just stacked, like Dixie cups in rows, you know, in various states.
Well, I know after the Oklahoma bombing, there was a special meeting by the militants with the Senate because the militants were being blamed for the Oklahoma bombing, and they wanted to, you know, clear out who they were and that they didn't do that. The Senate agreed to it. That was interesting. So they came together, and it was televised on TV. And the very first thing the militant brought out was a photo of this Gunderson freight car with the shackles. And they go, Senator, do you know what this is? You know, it looks like a freight car with human shackles. And that senator got so upset, he closed off the meeting, and that was it. Now, in the Oregonian, which is the local paper here in Portland, it said about, this is a new type of constraint for cars in a freight car. Yeah, 122 shackles is going to be used for cars to secure them in a freight car, I'm just sure. But that was the explanation they gave in the paper.
So I hear that your daughter is sort of like carrying on Phil's legacy. She's getting involved in you know, his works and the videos of him.
Yeah. Marie was devastated. She was 8 years old when he died, was murdered, and she doesn't feel that justice has been served because of the death certificate that says he committed suicide, and we know that's not what happened. And I think our hope is that with the continued efforts that she and I have tried to do, that perhaps they will question the fact of his death and change that to at least unknown or homicide, because that's really what it was. It was a homicide.
I just cannot believe the coroner decided that the rubber catheter hose that was wrapped around his neck that was done by suicide. That's just absolutely bizarre. I mean, I've just never heard of that, and for them not to even notice it, you know, until, a day later, it's just very bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, we got 5 minutes left on the show, Cynthia. What do you think the number one thing you want people to remember Phil by? What do you want people to think of when they think of Phil?
Yeah, he truly believed, you know, in what he was telling the public. He knew he was endangering his life by doing it. He had a lot of medical issues going on for him and felt his life was not going to be that long anyway, but he wanted to take the knowledge that he had and give it to the public. Thank goodness they had those videos going when he was giving his lectures. I feel sad, though, that they didn't show more details of, like, the photos that he was showing or the medals. I mean, you don't see the real detail that I saw in the original photos and the original paperwork that he had. And that all of that is gone now makes it really hard to say, hey, you know, it's all truthful. Well, where's the evidence? Well, you know, it's gone. They took it.
He didn't leave anything to you or to your daughter, any evidence at all of...
No, I mean, well, let's say if I had anything, I gave it away. Right?
Okay.
I didn't want to endanger me or the kids. We'd already been threatened by him being dead, you know. I mean, he gave himself up to protect me, to protect the kids. I have a son and a daughter, and he didn't want anything to happen to us, and the threat was that if he didn't give himself up to them, because he'd been able to escape them time after time, then they knew where I worked, they knew where the kids went to daycare, they knew where they went to school. That was the threat. So
I can't imagine the fear you guys must have felt knowing that Phil was, doing these works and that you guys were being watched and everything. And I just want to thank you and, your children for trying to carry on, Phil's legacy and his work. And it's unfortunate that, all of the evidence was stolen and, hopefully maybe someday, somehow, some of it will, be recovered somehow. But, what's important is you're here to tell the story and keep it going. And the show's about to end here in about 2 minutes, so I just kind of wanted to wrap up here with you, Cynthia. And thank you very much for being on the show. And if one of our listeners, wants to get in touch with you further to maybe, ask you some questions that they would feel more comfortable just contacting you, is there an email or something you can give out that you wouldn't mind people just, emailing you some questions, like?
Sure. Email would be a good way because it's tough with my phone. So it's CIM as in mother, B as in boy, I, D as in dog at Comcast.net. And I don't go on there very often, so if it takes a little while, I'm sure he won't mind. But I was very honored to be on your show today, and thank you for remembering Philip and his work.
Oh, no, thank you very much. And just to reiterate that email, it's CIMBID, is that what it is?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. At Comcast.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Cynthia, we're about to go off the air here, but I want to thank you very much for everything that your family has done to preserve, our own rights, as American citizens, and that is to freedom of speech, and disclosure is a right of way for everyone in the human race, and no person has the right to take that from anyone else. So I want to thank you for being on the show, and thank you to all my listeners, and I will talk to you soon, Cynthia.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye-bye.